Hey guys, this is Jay coming to you from 21st Century Reviews, bringing you yet another review of the Star Trek The Official Starships Collection by Eagle Moss, issue number 7, the Katinga-class Klingon Battlecruiser. Now I gotta be honest, I've been really waiting to do this one for quite a while. This is one of my personal favorites. We saw this ship in service to the Klingon Empire from the latter half of the 23rd century, well into the Dominion Wars of 100 years later. This design comes branched off of the original D7 class battlecruiser that we saw in the original Star Trek series. This is literally a design that saw service as just as a design for like 2 centuries. I think it's fair to say that it's basically kind of like the Browning M2 machine gun of modern era. Kind of one of those, if it isn't broke, don't fix it kind of ships. Design and everything, this thing always looked menacing when going head to head with the Enterprise, no matter whether it was the original one or the Enterprise D, or even in Deep Space Nine, in many of the good battle sequences that we got to see, like in the Way of the Warrior episode in season 4's opener of Star Trek DS9. Saw lots of them. And a lot of the cool things about this thing is we saw it in many different forms. We saw it in the D7 class in the original series. Watched it in episodes like The Day of the Dove. Saw a reference to it in Trouble with Tribbles. We got to see it a little bit closer up in, say, the Trials and Tribulations DS9 episode, where it actually showed us the ship a little bit closer. We saw the Romulan counterparts to it that they made in the Enterprise incident in the original series. Even in Star Trek the motion picture, we see a series of 3 of them, floating through space, making their way to the V'ger probe. Wow. We literally see this ship repeatedly throughout the series, all the way up to Star Trek 6. We see it, we don't really see it in any more of the films after 6. But I will make reference to Star Trek 6 because I built the Kronos 1 Star Trek 6 model as a kid the first time, and I actually built a second one of it just a few years ago. And it was kind of cool to actually take my time with it a little bit more the second time and really worry about paint application and everything, which is where, I hate to say it, but there is a couple of critiques I have for it. But without further ado, let me just point out that one of the great things about this was, like I was pointing out, that it's kind of one of those if it isn't broke, don't fix it kind of things. The armament that we saw on this ship, it had a standard twin-mounted disruptors that you never really saw, but they're right here on the very edges of this cowling right here, above the main torpedo housing and just below the main bridge and sensor dome, located right on the nose of the ship. Now, those disruptors you never saw in action on the series. Now, some might argue, saw them on Deep Space Nine. No, you didn't. Because those twin-mounted disruptors were never used on screen. Pretty much on movie screens, all we ever really saw was the use of the front photon torpedo tube, and then on the very back we would see that there is another one located directly in between its 2 impulse engines here. Now, most people would argue that this is the impulse engine. It is, but the vents are on the back. Those are the clear plastic pieces, which, by the way, I actually will give them a lot of credit for. Even on my old models of the Katinga, it actually didn't have those clear plastic things. So I actually really like that because it actually gives it something when you shine light on it. But anyway, back to the model itself, and I'm angling it just a little bit because I actually like this angle of it just a little bit better. Excuse me. Some of the variants that we saw of it were in like the episode The Emissary of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2, where we were introduced to Worf's lady counterpart and everything. We saw that ship when it would attack. It had disruptors mounted here and here. Everything, and that was its main function of disruptor fire there. Now, the Deep Space Nine argument is they said, well, I saw disruptors getting fired out of the nose of those old D7s or those old Katinga classes. Yes. In that instance, though, if you look close enough at the videography on it, it's actually coming directly out of the torpedo launcher. So it's fair to say that when the ships were modernized, like many old warships, even in the Navy and everything, they removed certain weapon systems to make way for other ones just because it makes sense. Now, So, that's why I say 2 centuries worth of design, and yet they were still using it. I don't think it was just because they had plenty of surplus on them. I think it was because they were still good. So, you know, can't fault that. I absolutely love this design. I used to have a whole group of these hanging from my ceiling when I was a kid. Most of them my father built for me, but I'd built a couple of them, like I said. It's just an iconic design. It looks menacing when it's coming right at you, and they were notorious for making it look like it's coming right at you in any of its screen appearances. So yes, the pros to this is the fact that I can actually do a really hefty comparison to it because I've built them, I've painted them, I've seen the variations from the original D7 design all the way up to the Katinga. This model is so good on details in certain spots, and then there's other spots where it's seriously lacking, which brings me to the fact that they made such an impressive attempt at details in regards to its Aztecing, and that's why I'm actually giving it its Aztec grading at a 5 out of 5. It's not just painted on. All the grooves are there. The mold is done correctly, and it's really done very, very well. You can actually see the molding a little bit better from the back view on my camera here. Everything, all those gray contours that you're seeing all over the top section here, being the dorsal section of the main part of the secondary hull, are all grooves. It's not painted on. It's painted on top of to give it a little bit more dimension, because the main body is a light gray, whereas the other is a darker gray. It gives it great contrast, and I absolutely love that. I feel like they really took their time with this model just to make sure that it was a really good representation. So let's return it back to this look, because I love that look. Now, with that being said, the paint application, though, is not 100% accurate. Now, I guess if you want to get technical, if you're basing it off the original model from the Star Trek The Motion Picture, it's pretty much spot on. It seems to follow that guideline fairly well. Now, if you go based on the Kronos 1 model from Star Trek 6 and from the episode in Voyager called Flashback, where we actually get to meet Kang again from the original series facing off against the Excelsior, which, by the way, the Excelsior is next in our review line. But we get to see that the inner parts of the engine housings, everything here, and on the opposing side, over on this side, are a light neon green color, which kind of goes to figure. I mean, we're talking about, an engine, and then, many of these other designs of other starships and everything, we see those kinds of color variations. Makes sense. The impulse engine manifold right up here is painted red. That's correct. I painted mine gold, but I think the red is to indicate that it's actually lit up, that it's actually functioning. Which makes it completely appropriate. My indication on my model kit for the Kronos 1 model was a gold hue, but that's just because according to the design specs, that's what color it was. But again, engine in operation, obviously it's going to look a little different. Now, the deflector shield housings that are up here on both sides of this area of the top half, right below the sensor dome and the bridge section, right above the torpedo bay, there's actually supposed to be 2 little green panels that are up there that are actually your deflector shields. They are not present. To be honest, I never painted them on my Kronos 1 model, simply because I actually thought it looked tacky, and I ended up painting over it because I thought it really detracted from the menacing, predatory look of the ship. So, like I said, with the paint, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 just because, to be honest, all that Aztecing, everything, when I did my model, was red. Because that's the way it was indicated according to the design specs. It was supposed to all be red, not a dark gray. Now, to be fair, I like the dark gray. So I'm not going to completely dismiss it because, like I said, if you look at Star Trek 1 versus Star Trek 6, there is a difference between the 2 models. So, to be fair, that could have been a variation that I'm not in knowledge of. Now, to the cons, there's that lack of paint that I was just referring to, which is why I'm also going to have to give the decals a huge 1 out of 5. there is not one decal on this model. Again, from my build, there's supposed to be this section right up here where the torpedo bay is on the very front section of the ship. That's actually supposed to be a decal. It's not engraved into the ship. It's painted on. I'm okay with it because, to be honest, it actually looks really, really good. But it's actually supposed to be a decal. It's not an Aztec. On the sides here, the old original series D7s used to have this thing that kind of looked like a TCS, even though it's written in Klingon. That's best way to describe it. That's what it looked like. But it was written in Klingon. But the Kronos 1 model had kind of like a crescent moon shape with like a blade going through it that was supposed to be on that. And then the ultimate flub that just bothers the heck out of me, and technically it's not a flub, it's only on the models. You never see it on screen. So I guess, to be fair, I'm nitpicking, but I feel like I have a right to nitpick. There is supposed to be a Klingon emblem, being the symbol of the Empire, located right here on the belly of the ship. Now, there is a gold-colored disc on the bottom of this model. That's where the emblem is supposed to be. The problem is it's not there. Now, the only reason I discovered this was when I flipped up the body of my old Kronos 1 model. I painted one on there because the indentation in the Aztecing was there, so therefore it belongs there. And if you actually look at the old still frames of a lot of the ships, it was on there. You just didn't see it. They didn't emphasize it. And I feel like that's kind of a slack on their part. On top of the fact that there's supposed to be some Klingon writing on the top section here of the dorsal section of the secondary hull, and another smaller Klingon emblem should be on the opposing side, and again, it's not. So weirdly enough, I actually have to give it a complete 1 out of 5 on decals, because there's not a single decal on this ship. Very unfortunate. But to be fair, though, despite the cons actually countering the pros just as well, I'm actually grading this ship at a 4 out of 5. Because, to be fair, what it lacks makes up for with a lot of its pros. Because, like I said, a lot of that Aztecing, they really didn't have to go that far with it. But they did, and they did it exceptionally well. So, I'm giving this entire model a 4 out of 5 rating. Excellent job, Eagle Moss. I also enjoyed the magazine, to be quite honest. It had a lot of interesting information in it. Again, this one actually didn't have a lot of filler, but I think it's, to be fair to say, they had a lot of experience with these models, so therefore they had a lot of information. I'll be kind of interested more to read the D7 model, with the hopes that maybe the D7 variant has maybe more information about the Romulans' use of them and everything, but who knows? We'll see. But again, as usual, questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the comment section below. Please feel free to message me through the new Facebook forum and everything if you have any questions or anything, or just want to talk Trek. I love to talk Trek, so come talk Trek with me. So, without further ado, we'll be doing issue number 8 here real soon, the USS Excelsior. So, look forward to seeing y'all next time, and we're working on it.